Queasy and Veno showed us every single strategy that you can have in order to take high ground during the FNCS Invitational. They absolutely dominated and seem to take it whenever they want. Let's take a look at 3 different plays and timings for taking high ground and show you how these guys were able to lock down the strongest position within the game. Let's go in the natural order, starting with the 4th to 5th zone transition. Then I'll talk about taking height in 5th zone, and then talk about taking high ground and holding it in moving zones. So for the 4th to 5th zone transition, it's really key to find yourself on the highest natural elevation within the lobby. That could be a building, that could be a mountain like in this case, or it could all be flat and then you have to position yourself higher than everyone else. What Queasy and Veno do here perfectly is find a position to hold themselves in and make sure they're keeping this high ground position. What they're essentially doing is holding this space, making sure teams don't chop them out. As we can see, Queasy is very adamant about making sure they don't get chopped out, and they're not afraid to use any materials and invest a lot in this position, knowing that it's going to pay off for them tenfold later on if they're able to pull 5th zone, which they do. We can see here the one thing Queasy is doing during this transition is making sure that they're not getting chopped out. Veno is taking some shots, putting some pressure on, and this is a great combination of what you should be doing as a duo. One team is making sure you're holding high ground, and the other teammate is making sure he's punishing players and looking for that refresh. The success of a high ground is going to come from being able to hold 5th zone and then also get a refresh, or you can save as many materials as possible and look for a refresh later on. But best case scenario is going to be getting a refresh in 4th or 5th zone to make sure you're stacked and can hold high ground without having to put yourself in vulnerable position. This is exactly what this duo does as they transition into moving zones. It's a little later than I would like to see, but this is part of their strategy, is to pad late, and we will see this strategy replicated in moving zones. They pad late, wanting to be the highest team and the last team to land. That way they can land on the highest natural or the highest built positions, crank up and reclaim the high ground position. Now let's go back and take a look at them taking high ground in 5th zone. They're not holding a strong position, but they're going to use launch pads and a refresh like we just talked about in order to set themselves up to hold high ground. Now let's run this back in slow motion. Queasy is going to pad and see Pink get knocked in front of him. They're still getting pressured, so Queasy's going to go grab the loot, try and secure the other elim. A Nos goes down. They're going to get all that loot, another launch pad, and then quickly pad to the edge of zone. They notice that the other high ground position, which is Hen and Vortex, aren't actually in zone, so they're not going to be able to hold themselves because Queasy and Veno have positioned themselves on the edge of zone. This is a cute awareness and a lot of heads up plays going on quickly, but that's why this team is so good. They're always able to multi-manage what is going on, seeing all these different pieces, and we see both players are cranking up and holding that position. It's not just one player trying to lock it in, but both players investing materials and holding this high ground. One other quick piece that must be mentioned is that they're fully going for this. They're not going to give this up as soon as they start getting shot at. Hen and Vortex would have easily just tarped over and taken high ground if Queasy and Veno let this up, but they shot back. It didn't matter if they put damage out or not and held this successfully. They need to continue to hold this position as they shift into moving zones. Veno is going to use the chrome splashes in a unique way, throwing them at the teams below them to make sure they're not going to be able to edit up and possibly harm the team up above. Queasy is doing the same thing in a different way though. He's using his builds to secure them as well as make sure they're not getting chopped in any way. The teamwork once again is flawless. For moving zones, they don't have a launch pad like we've seen them use in previous games. What they're going to do is use chug splashes to sit back, play storm a little bit, allow players to place their launch pad, recycle that launch pad, and then be the last team up in the air. This is, again, solid technique by them and a common principle within their gameplay. The other common thread is them going to be landing front side of zone, building a platform, and then just holding this position. The only objective here is to make sure that no team is going to land high ground, and they don't want to build this big tarp to allow another team to land on them. It's either going to be landing straight on their flats that they already built, or you're going to have to find a different way to take height. Even as Queasy begins to move forward, Veno is going to sit back and make sure the backside of their tarp is protected to allow them to hold this position. After establishing yourself on high ground, you shift into a mode of trying to hold it and prevent anyone else from taking it. We'll dive into that a little later, but let's find out how to take high ground in moving zones. Taking high ground in moving zones is the most difficult because there are going to be multiple players, like in this example, looking to make a play for high ground. Now, there's certain principles that you can play by in order to be able to regularly and consistently take high ground. What we see from these two is they're going to land together and establish a position. They're not going to give this up by any means. They're fully committing to the play. Often I see players go for high ground, someone's contesting them, they get shot once, and fully give that up. Queasy and Veno have the full commitment to this play, and that's what's able and causes them to be able to keep this on a regular basis. Not only that, but once they do get up and together, they once again, like we just saw in the last example, build a flat to put them on the same level and just fully focus on any players trying to crank or pad onto their heads and hold down this position. Instead of fully tarping across the zone, they're going to use a pad and go late. Veno is going to go first to establish himself, and then Queasy is going to follow. This is a great play to hold the backside of zone, not use a ton of mats, and really don't give someone a large area to land on to try and take height from you. Just as the duo tries to land on front side, re-establish themselves, another duo is going to go up and try and play high ground. Instead of panicking, Queasy and Veno are simply going to get together, box up, chili chug splash, and then once again pad onto height, taking the backside, focusing on one player first, putting the most damage out on one player, and ultimately forcing that team to go down. This is a great way to identify how to take high ground when another team is contesting you. The consistent, non-wavering effort for high ground was incredible, especially against the best players in the lobby. Regular principles of not giving up, sticking together, focusing on one opponent if you get contested, and then establishing a strong base that cannot be chopped is what we see game after game from these two, and it is why they were the most successful high ground team game after game. Now that I've showed you how to take high ground and hold it through moving zones, let's talk about how to win games. What is the way that you're going to be able to turn this high ground into a victory royale? Well, Veno and Queasy, they got us. Rarely, if ever, are you going to be able to hold high ground from 5th zone all the way until the end of the game without getting a refresh. The key is, when do you go for refreshes and how do you get them in order to be able to sustain the high ground? Well, Veno is probably the best there is when it comes to it, and he's going to show us exactly what to do. Veno finds two players on the backside coming out of storm, not building. This keys me in that these players are not going to be super healthy and are keen to be refreshed. Veno's going to jump in and put big damage on to initiate this fight. He's going to knock one player but not fully jump into this box. He's going to control some pieces to allow himself to escape, get the last elimination, and then block off the player that was shooting back towards them to allow him to grab all of the materials. Once he does that, he's quickly going to go back through his builds, go all the way back up, drop some stuff off for Queasy, and boom, that's how you get a perfect refresh. After Veno drops everything for Queasy, Queasy has enough to heal off and win this game if necessary. Veno's going to go try and close it out himself, which he does by hitting the last few shots, but it's always important to set yourself up just in case something goes wrong, allow the heal off to succeed, which was possible here, although unnecessary.